Welcome to Tuesday.
Welcome to Tuesday, Two Chaps, Many Cultures, and I'm utterly confused. Typically, the lineup is that I'm on the other side. Did I wake up on the wrong side of bed? Did we switch positions overnight, Brett? What happened? You're on my side.
You're being too kind. The fact is that pre-production error means I was in a completely different studio and a completely different address, and you got here before me, so therefore I'm on the other side.
Oh, that's what caused this. Okay. So today I'm the lefty, which go figure.
Right, you're the lefty, so don't worry about that. Yeah, you went the wrong way too. I did it too. Welcome Tuesday, global people. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this wonderful world where too much culture is barely enough for us every day, where we come live and alive.
Live and direct from the interwebs, from the virtual studio complex in the headquarter towers of Two Chaps, Many Cultures, where our overpaid interns do everything to make us look good.
Good, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, what are we talking about today? We're talking books. We've got another book. It's fantastic, wonderful.
A book that I haven't read yet, so I'll be the idiot. And you can tell me whatever you want because I have no idea yet. That's the magic word here. Yet.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, our special guest, and I'm sorry?
No, but go ahead.
Our special guest, of course, Csaba Toth, the author of said book. Here it is.
Ta-da!
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for taking time, Csaba. Where are you dialing in from? From
the sunny Brighton, UK.
Sunny Brighton.
Well, it's not exactly sunny, but sunniest part, at least.
Isn't that where city dwellers from London go to have a day on the beach?
And especially nights. It's a party town.
All right.
So
has your city been then become a hotspot because of all these daytime or nighttime tourists who may or may not bring infectious diseases to the town? Has Brighton suffered from that? Is COVID a hotspot, or are you a COVID hotspot because of that?
Not Brighton, not exactly, but as soon as the sun is out, all the Londoners are here. So last week was, I think, 2 days in a row, the hottest days this year, probably. So we had thousands and thousands of people.
So when you say the hottest day, so for people who have no idea what the summers are like in the UK, what temperature in Celsius is the hottest day so far?
That was 37 degrees.
Oh, wow. That is in the hundreds of Fahrenheit. So that is impressive. All right.
It's not pleasant at all. So there was no social distancing, nothing, because they discussed it with the virus that we are on holiday, so we don't care. That was the logic behind it.
Okay.
So let's see what happens in 2 weeks' time.
So common sense went out the window, and common sense would have probably told many of you that, British Isles, summer, that must be rainy, maybe light rain only, and people on the beach really, when he says it's hot, how hot is it really? Yeah, you heard the man, 37 Celsius, 100 something Fahrenheit. Don't ask me to do the conversion, which I think highlights the fact that common sense is everything but common. And the title of your book is
Uncommon Sense in Unusual Times.
Very timely. Very timely. So what can you tell us about the book? I haven't read it yet, so give me that one paragraph to convince me. Why do I need to read that book?
First of all, it's painful to hear that you haven't read it yet, but
I'm so sorry.
I'll try to get over that.
Okay.
But the book is based on, when you talk about cultural intelligence, then often people think that we talk about international companies and global tycoons, and they just dismiss the topic, and they think it's not important to them. And that's not exactly true. So uncommon sense refers to the fact that, for example, when you talk to someone, have you ever had the feeling that the other person had no common sense at all? That they just didn't get you?
Yes.
Pretty much it happens on a daily basis if we cannot choose who we want to interact with. So we never thought about the fact that they felt the same way about us, but for a different reason, which is an interesting thing. because we are right, and we demand common sense, which is technically demanding that you should come to the same conclusion as me, even though you have a completely different background, values, and psychological needs. That's naive at best, but probably it's more selfish. So cultural differences are just clashes of common senses. And if you look at the topic this way, then you can remove the illusion of superiority, the illusion of separation, and you can replace it with the power of synergy and curiosity. And it's not a binary decision immediately that I'm right, you're wrong, and we have to prove that we are right and the other person is not that smart. No, that's the problem with diversity. It can lead to synergy, but if you don't understand the topic, it turns into painful liability.
Now, I love this, Csaba, because I think you're singing our song. I think we the three of us, and probably many of those who are watching, we share that attitude or that worldview. Now, I think what I find noteworthy here is that both Csaba and I grew up in Central Europe, and both of us live in an Anglo-Saxon country. So Csaba, you're from Hungary, living in the UK. I'm from Germany, living in the US. And I'm not sure if you share the same observation as I do, that living in an Anglo-Saxon culture during these last few years, or maybe several years, it has become more binary. So I find myself in worldviews that tend to look at life and look at the world as either good, bad, black, white, right, wrong. However, my native culture does not always operate that way, and I suspect that Hungarian culture doesn't always operate that way either. Is that, do we share that experience? Do you have a similar way of looking at it?
To be honest, I don't know, because I'm not in Hungary now. Okay. But my assumption is that under stress, you see the real personality of people, countries, companies, and this is what we can experience right now. That there's this pandemic, everybody's under stress. There's no time and energy to put up a mask and pretend that we are somebody else. So when the world is falling apart around us, there's so much uncertainty. Then people are craving certainty, and even though that doesn't exist in nature, that's just an illusion that we created. It's normal. People want that. And because most people cannot really trust themselves because they don't know themselves that much, they have to find that kind of certainty in something else. And where do you find that? In national identity. That's what I can see now. Because it's strong. You can just hug the flag.
Or tribal identity, maybe. If it's not a nation, then it's whoever. And you said it, the illusion of superiority that you create, and Antimo likes that, how you highlighted that, so that we, as a group, we decide that this is who we are, and that makes us separate from others, and we claim it to be superior to that of others. That gives us a sense, or the illusion of a superiority, and the illusion of being safe or being in a predictable environment, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why the labels are so important now, and that's why the politicians can use them to divide people, because we can minimize the differences within the group and we can maximize them between them. And if the people are not united, then it's easy to control them. And that to me, that's the point, that it's sustainable if we know exactly who we are, what we stand for, and we can also accept it, and we can be okay with it. In that case, we don't have to bully anyone to feel important, and we don't have to hide to feel safe. But that's dangerous. Self-awareness, self-inclusion, that's powerful, but that's the missing step.
And as you said that, I was reminded of something that I learned in Latin class back in high school. It was one of the governing principles of the Roman Empire: divide et impera, divide and govern, or dictate the terms, right? So you create division, and thereby you control. And that is nothing that current societies have invented. That's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah, and it works. That's why.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your book. Or Brett, you read the book, or you're halfway through. So I'm going to sit back and learn now. Bring it on.
Well, I found myself, it's actually a great book because you can go back and forth. I'm not sometimes I'm not very linear. So I find myself looking for things that I want to learn from at the very core. I found one of the most interesting chapters in this was the chapter 7, which is about the recognition that this has gone on for thousands and thousands of years of human history, and the great classical philosophers identified certain groups of people or certain groups of ways of thinking, and right back to Aristotle and Plato and all those kind of guys, right? Those kind of guys, which because they're just guys, right? They were all back then, I guess they were mostly chaps. And so I found, that kind of thing going forward to a chapter like that and reading that, and that realization that then, which I've kind of already done, I kind of like to watch the human experience. And I may not, I'm as guilty as anybody as not being as self-aware as I should be, but I'm always doing the work of self-awareness. I would say that, the book is great. I mean, it's obviously, Csaba, and I'm not rubbing your ego here, but I'm saying you're a lot smarter than me when it comes to putting this stuff together. But it certainly is not it's not a book that stands above and talks down to people. It's actually a very approachable and accessible book that weaves through. So if you want to get into it, weaves through the greater, higher thinking that influences the way that we interact with each other as a human species. So if that was your goal, it worked for me, because I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, so sharpest tool in the shed, so it worked for me. But and then of course it comes out of, and when did you launch this book? It wasn't long, it was over a few months ago, right?
Yeah.
So May, and that came out of much of your work that you did leading up to that. So where did that come from? What kind of work did you do to prepare in kind of writing the book?
The reason is nothing noble. I would love to come up with some amazing story, but that's not exactly true. It's not that I'm that much smarter. It's just I made more mistakes, and I really got frustrated because I didn't understand what happened exactly. But the feedback that you gave me is exactly what I wanted, because the goal is to make this topic as uncomplicated and practical as possible. So even in the first chapter, I mentioned it, that if somebody wants the references, send me an email. That's all good. I can back up anything that I said. But I want to make it understandable to most of the people. It has to be easy to read. It's easy to overcomplicate things, but it's not a book to tell people what to think. It's a book to help them think, to question the status quo for the right reasons, just to double check some of those outdated and incomplete ideas that we have in our field that can do more harm than good sometimes, depending on how we approach it. So the book is based on the last pretty much 10, 15 years of work and failures and successes, because I studied international management at Sussex, and my dissertation was about the implications in Eastern and Western European joint ventures. So it was pretty practical, and I wanted to compare the Hungarian managers with the Western Europeans. But the trick was that in Hungary, we had two generations, the one that grew up in communism and the new generation that was affected by it indirectly. And the data showed that the gap between the two generations in Hungary was much bigger than the gap between the new generation and the Western Europeans, which contradicted everything that we learned about what all the academics claimed, that culture is country-specific and stable. I said, no, look at the numbers, that's not true. But who are you to question the big boys? If they've been around for 40 years, it's not polite, you are just a student. So I forgot about it. I started my own company, which was a restaurant booking site. You book a table, we get the money. Of course, it was much more exciting than that, but that's the business model. So we started with 30. Of course, it was fantastic. So we started with 35 restaurants here in Brighton, and in 1 year we had 5,500 all over the UK. Became a joint venture and the fastest growing restaurant listing. And on paper, everything made sense. We were getting the results, but on an individual level, I couldn't stand the French CEO. We got to the point where we had to get out of the business. It is still online, but we are not involved anymore. And this is when I started my research. I didn't understand how come that was the exact topic of my dissertation. I had years of experience. That department itself is number one in the world in its category. And I couldn't put that theory into practice. How's that possible? So I got certified in a lot of different things, because my assumption was that if all of those models are or were correct, there must be a huge overlapping part. And that's what I'm interested in. Not the fluff on the top, but the structure beneath the surface, the blueprint of why people think and behave differently. And during that research, I discovered a lot of different things. It turned out that lots of people had the same problem, and that's how it started.
So when you decided to question the grand masters of our trade, so to say, the big boys, and again, boys, huh? It's
much of it was, right?
That didn't change much in 2,500 years, right?
No.
The foundational research in our field was again spearheaded by men, and I think it has changed since then a little bit, and which I think is a good development. How did that feel to challenge them, or have you gotten pushback, or have you received I don't know, intimidation, or were you being questioned in your approach because you went against the grain of what was the established doctrine for 30 plus years?
I mean, pretty much. You can imagine that there's a company and they build a business on their model. They've been around for 30, 40 years, and there are lots of big companies like that. And they sell intercultural training or international training as intercultural one. So, for example, if you look at the research, then more than 80% of cultural differences exist within countries, not between them. Now we can see why the country-specific approach is not the silver bullet they claim it to be. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not a criticism, because those models exist, or they were created under those circumstances, and there's a specific purpose. If you move to a country, yes, you have to learn about what people are used to. Of course, it's very useful, and you need that. But if your success depends on how well you understand an individual in front of you, if that's your client, your boss, your colleagues, or your partner, or your parents, it doesn't matter. It can be really misleading. Culture is what we are used to, not who we are. Mm-hmm. So even if you look at the research, at least 70% of the people in a country are significantly different to what is normal around them. And at least 20% of people are the exact opposite. And that's painful. And those people feel frustrated. So answering your question, yes, of course, I got this feedback. And this is to me, the problem. That if for example, you're an accountant or lawyer, you have to be up to date in your field. It's not optional. If you're a coach or trainer, then you do what you want. It's a diluted market. And maybe the clients trust the trainers and coaches, and they believe that they are up to date. They have the latest solutions. Because let's be honest, the world changed a lot in the last 40 and 50 years, more than in the 150 years prior to that, but we are using the same tools. More than 95% of companies buy and sell people solutions created in the 60s and 70s, mm-hmm. based on the answers of people who were working without internet, EU, cheap flights. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they had really different challenges than us. It's like trying to fix a smart TV with tools designed for black and white ones. We can try harder, but does it make sense? So something has to change, evolving. We can refuse evolution, but for how long? It's going to come back.
In modernizing or updating our industry or our field of work, there's a few umbrella organizations, some associations that would be a conduit to facilitate that. So I would argue that the organization that Brett will be presiding over starting this fall as the incoming president for CITAR USA, that's basically a question for both of you. Does a body like CITAR or ATD, the Association for Training and Development, or International Coaching Federation, or whatever industry association we're looking at, what part of the responsibility to keep everyone in the industry up to date on current research falls into the hands of a CITAR organization? And has that been happening to the degree that you would like to see, Csaba?
I mean, I've done it already. I've worked with CITAR in South Asia, worked with CITAR Spain, CITAR Europa. So yes, of course, I'm more than happy to do webinars, conferences, anything. Of course, that's why I published the book. And the book is not a book about global disc. That's only one chapter, nothing more. Mm-hmm. The book is about the philosophy, the mindset, the research behind it, because that's the most important thing. Global Disk is just a tool, but it doesn't matter how good it is or any tools if we don't have the right mindset, if we don't know what is the benefit of using it and what is the cost of ignoring it. And that's the problem, that we got used to it. I mean, we all belong to 15 or 20 cultural groups at the same time. Country of origin is one of those. So when we talk to someone, even within our own family, what are the chances that the other person belongs to the same 15 or 20 cultural groups like us? It's next to zero. Every single conversation is a cross-cultural dialogue, but most people don't know about it. And that's why they are not looking for the solutions that could unlock that incredible potential within and between people. But if we overcomplicate something, they're not going to use it.
I find that just quickly, I find that with clients. I mean, we're working with clients, and of course, I've learned at the benefit of learning from people that have done the academic research. But it just, when you get in front of a client who really has got to manage 5 or 6 or 12 or 15 countries, and the people within it, not as you say, not just the countries, but the people within those countries and their various variations. This is where I think the opportunity is to start the conversation with some of the established tools, but then bring in the deeper aspects of what you're talking about. You mentioned Global Disk, what would you call it? What would you call it? A tool? What would you call it, Csaba? How would you describe Global Disk?
I think it's a profiling tool.
Okay.
And you know what you mentioned, for example, using the country-specific approaches within an international team. I can show you case studies where often an international team is much more homogeneous inside than a random local team. And to me, that's the issue sometimes, that, you know, we just point out statistically average national differences to widen the gap instead of building a common ground where we can learn how to make the most of our differences. Because chances are that those people, even if they are international, deep inside, they are much more similar than most people. That's homophilic diversity. You know, when you have to employ somebody, why would you hire a person who annoys you? You know, that doesn't make sense. You have enough hassle in your life. So, you know, most people would trust and like somebody like themselves, and they don't even realize that. And that's the result of that. And that's the reason why the visible layer of diversity has no proven benefit unless there is cognitive diversity, which is the difficult one. That's the deep layer. That's not visible, but that's the one that makes or breaks a team. So that's the interesting part.
And to comment on this, I agree, because I've worked with people who annoyed the hell out of me, and it was usually in teams that were quite effective in accomplishing what they set out to do, and in part because of the annoyance that we struck upon each other, and we, unless you manage the annoyance level, you're not going to get those results. You can annoy each other if you know how to handle that, and to have somebody to moderate or facilitate the commonalities and work out those commonalities. And when I said earlier, you're the third Hungarian that I talked to today, I had this experience just today with a very diverse group of people on an international call, who are trying to create commonality within their organization, and they were so busy with figuring out what sets them apart, and to identify the differences, which is all fine and dandy. I'm not going to argue that this is not helpful to recognize where do we have gaps, where is our overlap least possible. That's okay to identify that, in my opinion. And then I would say I'm proud to have been able to steer them towards, let's figure out where are our commonalities, and what would you like to define as your common ground. What do you want to enshrine in your team code of conduct, so to say. And that is, in my opinion, in the work that we do, is the more rewarding part. I think it's quite boring to go in and tell clients, okay, here's culture A and here's culture B, and here's how you're different, and you better watch out for these things, right? And if you don't, that's going to cost you dearly, and you're going to hurt the relationship, and blah, 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 blah. This is not a solution approach. This is identifying a problem without providing an approach to how to improve. And I'm very much aligned with you when you say, Csaba, that it's about creating what we have in common and identifying what we may have in common, despite the uncommon sense of believing that there's something that separates us.
It's just difficult to talk about it because 95% of our actions are driven by values and beliefs we are not even aware of. So how much can we reflect on the symptoms? It doesn't matter. We don't know the root cause of the problem. We don't have the words. We don't have the concepts. And that's the challenge. Talking about personal and cultural differences is difficult. It's a sensitive topic. So this is the main USP and then the biggest help and the biggest challenge at the same time, that we can give people the vocabulary. We can measure the mindset gap between what is natural to you and what is normal around you, or what is natural to me. We can break it down, we can see the gap, and then we can pinpoint it. Because diversity is the greatest asset or liability. It depends on how much we understand ourselves and others.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult topic.
Csaba, there's a question from one of our viewers. Where's the best place to get your book at? I thought it was Amazon. I think we posted the Amazon link in the comments below. Is there another good source where people can get your book?
I think it's on pretty much all the platforms, Goodreads and all the other ones.
So there you go, Karen.
Did you do an audio book yet? You haven't done an audio book yet? No. Okay. I like audio books, but that's a personal question. But
No.
well, of course, it'd be. Well, I guess there's a lot of great. Of course, you've got images in here. Audio book kind of lose it when you want to look at the imagery and the tool itself. I've also posted the link to the the global ICQ2 in the which is Csaba's tool, which is great. I mean, I've taken it. It's fascinating. I mean, I love these things. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to this stuff, and I just love reading it. I mean, again, it's self-awareness. It's looking at something that you may not have been aware of in your thinking, in your approach, and of course, it's taken. To me, I mean, this is a personal anecdote, but I think I've heard it from a lot of people. Once you know that, and you know how you possibly respond to the people that are different or the same as you, it makes for a different conversation.
Yeah.
It makes for sometimes frustrating because you find yourself second guessing everything, really questioning everything, which is difficult for people who think in a binary sense, black and white, right or wrong, and stuff like that. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, sometimes people use it the other way around. They read the report and after that they use it as an excuse. Yeah, I can do this because I'm this type. No, really, that's even worse. If you know that you're that type, now you can work on your comfort zone and your behavioral flexibility.
Yeah.
And to me, that's real cultural intelligence. That's the right mindset. That's the uncommon mindset. That you can see the same situation from different perspectives. So you can make a better decision. And then you can choose to respond instead of just reacting. So it's about cognitive and behavioral flexibility.
Great. Fantastic.
I need to get that book. That's what it boils down to.
When's your birthday? I'll buy it for you.
I'll send it to you. It's more than a book. It's a hybrid book. And what I mean by that is that, you read the book. It doesn't matter how good it is. Information doesn't lead to transformation. So it includes around £500 worth of resources, the assessment, an interactive coaching platform, and even a certificate at the end. That's an investment in that. Because you can read a chapter and also you can experience it. So there's an interactive learning platform. People learn from experience, not just from knowledge. And then once you finish, you can join a Facebook group. And that's a journey. One book is not going to change your life, but when you can share your concerns, your ideas, your questions with people who are on the same path, that's a different level. And we all need that, especially now.
You said something earlier, and I'm only paraphrasing because I don't remember the verbatim sentence, but you said it's about ignoring that we approach situations individually different, and without, whether it's personality or culture or the combination of both, and ignoring that there is that there are these differences, or that there are misperceptions about how people show up in the world, is tied to a risk, a financial risk, if you're talking organizational level, if you're talking corporate level. And I get this question a lot, because our line is, if you don't get it, then it will get you. If you don't get culture and people's personalities, then essentially it will bite you in the behind. And the follow-up question is often, well, can you quantify that? What is at stake here? What would be your answer to that?
Oh, very concrete. First of all, because we have to make this topic practical and uncomplicated. Nobody is interested in the fluff because it's not specific enough. So I always try to do that. So one thing is that when we talk about personality and culture, then it's easy to misunderstand it. And most people think that you cannot even compare them. And if you look at the superficial layer, it's true. If you look at it on cognitive level, you cannot even separate them. So when we talk about individual and group mindset, then immediately we can see that it is compatible. Because technically, culture is just a group habit driven by values and beliefs. It's nothing more. The underlying values and drivers of a group behavior are exactly the same as the underlying values and drivers of individual behavior. The difference is in the intensity. And even in a country, at least 70% of those people are different. So when we talk about a corporate environment, then there was a company in the US, they still exist, the Three Circle Partners. They wanted to understand, how can we put smart people in a team? And they rarely excel. They deliver only a fraction of the results they are capable of. And they don't know why, or they don't know how much potential remained untapped. So they wanted to find out the exact number. So they gave an individual assessment to each member of the team. They scored them individually, and then they had to submit one collectively. And that's how they could measure the result, the group result, and the best possible individual score. And there was a massive gap. And then they repeated it hundreds of times. And the average gap was 79%. That's how much potential is lost in a team. And here's the problem, that if you have more than one person in a team, it's already multicultural, even if it's not international. So believing that, everybody is from the same country, then we understand each other. No, you wear the same uniform, you're the same. Of course you're not. The different personality types exist because they have very different psychological needs and values, and their behavior reflects those values and meets their needs. That's the thing. Unless they have to conform to certain norms. And in every single group, there's a normal behavioral style that most people conform to. So that's why psychometric assessments are just incomplete solutions in that sense, because those people are going to conform to those norms. But that frustration, the pain inside is there. That's why we have to measure the mindset gap between people, between what's natural to you and what is normal around you. If that's your family, your company, your country, it doesn't matter. There's always a normal behavior style, which is driven by different values and beliefs. And 79%, that is a lot.
Bottom line.
Exactly. And so this is the thing that when I talk to clients, I just ask them, is this 90% in your team or 50? But what we can guarantee is there's a lot of potential. And this is a really positive approach, because you're not telling them that they are not good enough. You tell them the exact opposite. Guys, you're awesome. And you have much more potential. And I can help you unlock it by giving you the blueprint of why people think and behave differently. 90% of business is interaction between people who think and behave differently.
Yep, I agree.
Which is incredible. But most companies focus on technology, policies, things that you can hold in your hand. And this is what I had to realize. People need tools. We have to make this topic tangible and practical and as objective as possible. So when they can hold that report in their hands, when they can see the people on a sliding scale, nobody can use the excuse that, you just said it because I'm a man or woman, black or white. I said, no. What matters is what's inside of you. Everything is relative. Everything is compared to you. So when you had your question about Hungary in the very beginning, to be honest, if I compare my personal profile, then it's much closer to the UK average than the Hungarian one. And I can also show you case studies where we had to create a high-performing team for a Fortune 300 company in Germany. And they employed a lot of Brazilian engineers. And of course, we started with the typical Brazilian and the German approach, very different. But when they saw the report, the group report, it turned out that more than 90% of those Brazilian engineers were much more German inside than most Germans. That's when everything changed. They found the right environment, which felt comfortable. And that makes sense, because when you look at the research where they compared 17 different culture groups in terms of range of differences and practicality, the bottom three were the country of origin, gender, and generation. Interestingly, these are the ones that most companies focus on when they want to increase diversity, which doesn't make sense at all. Because you don't choose those groups. And even if you are completely different, you learn how to navigate efficiently. But it doesn't mean that this is who you are. But if you look at the culture groups that you choose, your profession, your educational level, your hobby, then ideally you choose the ones that are the most comfortable ones. They just feel right. And that's why often, a group of engineers from different countries are much more similar inside than random group of people from the same country.
Go ahead. I just want to ask you about, do you think this is applicable to like third culture kids, right? That oftentimes recognize that they're drawn towards not people from their country of origin, but from people with their experience of living and growing up outside of their parents' cultures. Do you think it has application in that sense too?
Maybe it's the sense of familiarity,
right?
Or something unique that you have a lot in common. Maybe that. But for example, we have the license in the US, and she was convinced that, I'm so attracted to foreigners. They're so much more comfortable to work with them. And then we looked at the profiles. We had some coaching sessions, and it turned out that it's not about being a foreigner. She liked being with people who were like her, like that type of person, outgoing, people-oriented, bubbly. So you see, you don't have to go anywhere. You find those people. But when you have to work with very different people and they drain you, then there's a problem. And this is the language that finally connects with people, because when we, for example, talk about growth mindset, it's a fancy term. Try harder, learn from your mistakes. Fantastic. But there's so much more to it. If you look at the numbers, because we like being concrete, then 60 to 80% of all problems in a company stem from strained relationships between people. And the top three reasons are clash of values, clash of personalities, and poor leadership. And all three of them stem from the same source, the lack of understanding of why people think and behave differently. So that's pretty important. So most of the opportunities, time and energy, are lost for two main reasons, technically. One is friction with people who think and behave differently. And the other one is friction with ourselves, self-sabotage. So what if the highest level of growth is when we stop wasting our potential? That's our topic.
And that's uncomfortable for a lot, because looking that uncomfortable truth in the eye is not easy for a lot of people. You said that earlier, Csaba, that becoming aware of one's own type of who we are, what is the essence of me. Looking at that is not always easy for everyone. I notice that a lot in the work that I do, that that is often where we hit a wall in the work, and only those who are willing to either find a door through that wall, or walk around it, or tear it down, or whatever metaphor you want to use, that's when a literal breakthrough happens. And those who are comfortable, or who want to be stuck in front of that wall and say, no, I don't want to go further than that's where the work usually ends. And unfortunately, I've run into people like that, and they can be, there are ways to help them overcome that self-sabotage, or that self-imposed limitation. And sadly enough, there are people who don't want that, or who don't see a benefit in it in that very moment.
I fully agree with you. One of my favorite saying is, I think it's Native American, and it says, you cannot wake up somebody who is not asleep. And technically, this is what you described, because people don't do anything until it hurts enough. So that's always my controversial advice to our licensees, that if you really care about someone, you hurt them, but gently, in a nice way, because we have to amplify that pain to the level where they take action.
But we use a phrase in our company. We use a phrase. It's called ruthless compassion. So we hurt them ruthlessly, however, with love. So it's not that we do this because we don't like you. We do this to give you a nudge. It's
Well, oftentimes, if we talk about growth mindset, people will push back and say, well, it's just all about optimism, isn't it? Isn't it about just being positive thinking and that kind of thing? Well, that is that's kind of undervaluing what I think. I mean, I'm thinking about the idea of growth mindset is great unless you know what you're growing into. And that's the key. Is it maybe it's part of the fault that we try and project what success looks for them in our eyes, but maybe that's not what they want. Maybe that's it. That's identifying, helping them, leading them to the point of what do they want to be when they grow up. When this growth happens, which is obviously not a destination, it's a continuing journey. Yeah. But when this growth happens, what is it going to look like at the end? Is that something we want them to grow into, or is it might be completely different? So I think that this, again, has a potential. We're getting into a lot of complicated things. It's complicated to me because I'm not the smartest guy, but I mean, it tends to me to be something that I think is taking a step back. And that's where maybe some of the pain comes in, is then having them realize that what they've really been going for. Seth Godin talks about sunk costs, right? You can give yourself the gift of a degree as a doctor, right? But come to being 40 years of age and realize that I didn't really want to be a doctor. That was what my parents wanted me to do. And you can say, okay, well, I can take that gift of that 25-year-old who became a doctor and say, thank you for that. That was valuable. It worked so far, but no thanks anymore. That's a painful decision to then grow into something that you really became passionate about, you really want to do with your life and move forward in that. And that doesn't matter if you're 40, 50, 60 or 70 to me. Anyway, that's kind of my rant on growth mindset.
That makes sense. Positive thinking is important, and if you don't believe that everything is possible, then you're not going to put the work into it. Right. So when we talk about growth mindset, it's about how fast you can run, pretty much. But for example, we have a signature course, the ICQ Growth Mindset course, and that's a very different take on the topic, because yes, you can run faster, but how big is your baggage? How about getting rid of that? And, we just discussed with numbers that 60 to 80% of all problems stem from the lack of understanding of why people think and behave differently. That's draining us. People driving each other crazy. So, the biggest distance between two people is misunderstanding. And that's why we talk about, uncommon mindset and cultural differences as clashes of common senses, because the world makes sense from your perspective. So if we have that kind of psychological safety and trust between us, I can ask you, so we disagree, fantastic, tell me, why do you think you're right? Because I'm sure that you think you're right, that you have a reason. So tell me. And that's how we can see the same situation from different perspectives. But if that's missing, then we fight. And this is what we can see now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, to me, self-inclusion is so important, to have the self-esteem. And you disagree with me, you don't like me, fine. The world is not going to collapse because of that. If my self-esteem doesn't depend on external approval or how many people like me or need me, then it's a much more stable world.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yet I do realize from my life experience how hard that is. It used to be hard for me years ago. I got over that, thank God. And I know a lot of people who struggle with exactly that. They need the outside approval. And it's I think that's why that journey begins with inside oneself. It's about finding who you are and which values drive you and your behavior before you can actually stand in your own truth, so to say, and don't need anyone's approval to engage at a level that you just described as one that is engaging rather than dividing or putting up the wall. Uncommon sense in unusual times or for unusual times? In unusual. Uncommon. Hold it closer to the camera, Brett, will you? Let's bring this up close. Here it is. Uncommon sense in unusual times.
For those who want to screenshot it on the replay or whatever.
Yes, you were listening to the author of this book, and you see the links how to get it down here. Thank you, Csaba, for taking time today. This was very engaging for me. I love these kind of conversations. That was great. Excellent.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And you've got, and then anybody you want, yes, click on that link for ICQ.global and follow that link, and you'll find that if you're interested in any of the assessment, the tools or anything like that. But the one thing I do love about Csaba as well is that he's accessible. He's just, the guy's there all the time, right? And that's what, when you know that somebody really believes in what they're doing and they stand behind it, they really are there accessible all the time. Send him find him on LinkedIn, Facebook, all kinds of stuff. You know, we're just annoying.
Find us. Just find him. Find all of us.
Otherwise, he'll just go and sit on the beach and have a good time, and we don't want that to happen. We're going to send him some work. Thank you very much, Csaba, for a wonderful conversation. I agree. I could have done this. All day. This is fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.